So you want a Magplar solo PvE build, huh? Well, you'll probably want one that can solo the hardest world bosses in the game. Beat the hardest solo arena in less than 30 minutes like Batishram Hollows, have infinite sustain, crazy self-healing, and extremely easy to play. And the best part, no mythic, no trials gear required. Just base game, no DLC gear. Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com here with my GODPLAR build, my strongest solo PvE build yet. Now I'm going to walk you through step by step how to play this build, why it's so strong, and give you a bunch of flexible options for gear for the average player. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and leave me a comment if you enjoyed this video. The Magplar remains the strongest solo PvE build, and with this simple loadout, skills, gear, you can do almost anything solo YOLO. Buckle up, it's time to jab. So we're on the Magplar, and you're probably wondering, okay, what makes the Magplar so strong? Well, you're probably not wondering. It's puncturing sweeps, your main spammable that heals you. Let me explain a little bit about this that someone may have not told you. So puncturing sweeps, it has an 8x6 meter radius. So the first thing to know about this ability is trying to match where it actually points and hits. The more targets you have hit, more healing you get because it heals you based on the damage done. This seems very obvious, but not a lot of Magpars know this. Both your range and the width. So first demonstration up, right? It hit actually right this far away. Look at how wide the angle of the spear really is. Right here, it's still hitting. And look how long it hits. So we'll go right here. So you have quite a wide berth in terms of where this hits and why. See a lot of Magpars, including myself, right on top of bosses like this. You do not need to do that. As long as you're in range to be able to light attack and hit them, along with hitting your puncturing sweeps, this is what you do to try to maximize your damage. Hit as many targets, especially playing solo. You don't have someone pocket healing. What you're trying to do with your Magic Templar is do as much damage and self-heal through damage as possible, and you do it by puncturing sweeps. Couple other things about puncturing sweeps that's useful to know, and that's the passives in here. Slot and Age Spear ability gives you increased crit damage, so you're always going to have one on the front, one on the back because of this passive. Gain minor protection for 6 seconds, reducing damage taken by 5% when activating the Age Spear ability. Puncturing sweeps is obviously that. Another reason we take a High Elf, which I'm going to get to a little bit later, is because that passive stacks on this one here, Spell Recharge. When you use an ability with a channel or a cast time, you take 5% less damage. So while you're channeling puncturing sweeps with a High Elf, you're taking 10% less damage. Not to mention you're doing a massive amount of self-healing. This is why the Magplar shines. You're able to throttle down on damage without having to take time to heal yourself, especially with solo without mythics. Another thing about puncturing sweeps that I recently learned, had a separate video on it, but I think it's worth talking about, is quick jabs or fast jabs. And what you're trying to do is as your character brings the right leg forward, you're going to left click, or on console, you're going to fire your trigger, light attack then, and starting the weave. So as it goes forward, we're going to go here, now click. And you can get a little bit really faster, real tight jab window where your arms don't even come up. So with practice, you're going to be able to do that. Why is that relative? This character, any character in Elder Scrolls Online, light attacks is on a global cooldown. Abilities are on a global cooldown. And if you sync them up together like a heartbeat, light attack ability, you can put in a lot more damage in a small window. This too applies to puncturing sweeps. Even though it's a 1-second channel, you're going to try to layer those two attacks together. If you do a DPS parse, whether you're solo or otherwise, you should be maybe 2, 3, 4, 5. One of your top 5 sources of damage needs to be light attacks. That means you're doing it properly. It's just free damage. So remember, when the right leg comes up, do that. I know that's a lot about one ability, but it's the core bread and butter. And if you don't understand the length, the width, the depth, the reason you center your build around puncturing sweeps, you're going to fail as a Templar. All right, now we got a 30-minute video about puncturing sweeps. Just kidding. On to the next ability, and that's Radiant Glory. So typically what you do in Elder Scrolls Online is you have a main spammable. This is your ability that you use in between applying your damage over time effects. Why you apply damage over time effects is this. Something DPS-wise outperforms your main spammable. So for instance, if I hit puncturing sweeps here, I would use that as a filler if Purifying Light wasn't available. The reason why is if Purifying Light's available off cooldown, I should reapply it because it will do more damage than my main Spammable, my filler ability, okay? We're going to get to damage over time a little bit later, but it's important to note that you're using these damage over time, these buffs, these debuffs, and then puncturing sweeps as a filler. If all else fails, you forget what to do, use puncturing sweeps. Now, you use puncturing sweeps until a certain percentage of HP, where we have a quote-unquote execute. This is Radiant Glory from the Dawn's Wrath. This does a lot of things for us. This specific morph is really impactful because it still heals us. The other morph's going to do a bit more damage, but it's not going to heal you. So playing solo, yes, you'll sacrifice a little bit of damage, but when you go from massive burst healing using puncturing sweeps to nothing healing you, you'll die a lot of times. So it's not worth the sacrifice. So right around 30%, 25%, some of the math nerds will know, I switched from using my filler ability, puncturing sweeps, to using Radiant Glory. So it replaces puncturing sweeps. And with this morph, you're not going to have to worry about survivability. You will be very, very strong, and it has a lot of range. So you can backpedal. And if you're not doing anything else and you're using a dagger setup, which I'll tell you in a little bit why I'm using it, this is your filler, main Spammable at range. Now, the Dawn's Wrath is really important to know, and while we're in the Dawn's Wrath section on Radiant Glory, there's some very, very important passives that we want to make sure that we understand, because when you're playing this ability, you're going to want to activate them. 1. Prism. Casting a Dawn's Wrath ability while in combat generates 3 ultimate. This can occur every 6 seconds. So Purifying Light has a 6-second cooldown roughly, so we're going to generate ultimate, which leads to quicker ultimate, more damage, things die faster. So it's really important that you understand these passives while you're casting these abilities alongside outperforming your main Spammable. Another one that's really impactful is Illuminate here. Even though this is solo, this is going to give you minor sorcery, increasing your spell damage by 10%. You're going to use spell power potions to get the 20% increase. So with spell power potions, using Purifying Light or Radiant Glory or another Dawn's Wrath ability, you're going to have constant 30% increased spell damage, hitting a lot harder. So now you know, puncturing sweeps, main Spammable, it's going to replace right around 30-25% health on a priority target like a boss or a mob. In AoE situations, I usually just hit puncturing sweeps because it hits more mobs rather than a single target Radiant Glory. So when in doubt, if you're freaked out, just hit puncturing sweeps. Okay, now we already talked about another ability, Purifying Light. It soaks up damage like a balloon. After a while, it blows up. So this is what Purifying Light looks like. You put a little beam on him, but you'll notice when it expires, it leaves a little circle out here, and it heals you for a massive amount. Right now, unbuffed, it's critting for 4,200. That's a massive amount of healing when it explodes, regardless of the damage that it does. So when it explodes, combined with puncturing sweeps, you're getting easily 5,000 heals a second from them 2 abilities alone. Now, last 6 seconds, you're going to have to constantly reapply it, and this is the primary damage over time / debuff / whatever you want to call that you're going to maintain as a solo player. And you could even simplify this and basically have a 1-bar build where you're using puncturing sweeps and Purifying Light and do a lot of damage and be very survivable. It's going to proc the Dawn's Wrath passive, generating ultimate. It's going to give minor sorcery. So primary thing you're going to cast in between your puncturing sweeps is going to be this. Now you have 2 abilities, and primarily you're going to set them on your bar to, well, increase your damage by not doing anything. One is Inner Light. It's going to give you the spell critical, which is not too important because you're going to get potions for that primarily, but what it's going to do is increase your max magic by a lot. So 5% here, then we come to the Mages Guild abilities here. You're going to have a couple more. Increase your max magic by 2% here, and magic recovery by 2%. Also, another thing you can do is activate the ability to get Empower. So before you launch in, you can actually activate it, go to your back bar, and get a huge, massive, heavy attack, or even a light attack before you start combat. So don't sleep on the Empower to start combat. Now, if you're just starting out the build and you don't have Mage's Guild, because I know how painful it is to get a hold of it, you can use something like Toppling Charge for a little bit more ability. This is going to lower your damage a lot overall, but it's nice if you're leveling or doing Overland or even PvP, and that's what I slot my PvP build, Toppling Charge in replacement of Inner Light right here, just for some more mobility and a stun. That might help you out while you're leveling or new to the game. Now, next moving on the front bar is our last active ability, and this is Barb Trap. So what Barb Trap's going to do is going to give you an important buff, and that's Minor Force. You can get minor force in a variety of different ways. Typically, people used to get it from Medusa's 5-piece item set, or you can get it from Channeled Acceleration from Sigic Order. That's going to give you a little bit increased critical damage. It's really, really nice. This is a stamina-based ability, but now with the hybridization, it scales off whatever's highest, which is going to be spell damage and max magic. So you look at the tooltip here, it's going to trigger over time as you place it, and it's going to do bleed damage and a lot of bleed damage for 18 seconds. And it's also going to give us our buff. So how we're going to play and why we use Trap Beast is we're playing in melee range anyways. So we can put the Trap Beast down. You can see it proc there, and it deals a lot of damage, and it applied the hemorrhage status effect as well because it's the bleed physical damage. So it's going to do a lot for you. Not to mention, we're going back to the passives, and it's so important to understand these, that increasing your weapon and spell damage by 3% per Fighter's Guild ability. So just slotting it on our front bar is really, really juicy. Not to mention, here we go again, you generate 3 ultimate whenever you kill an enemy with the Fighter's Guild ability slotted. So slotting on your front bar, using Dawn's Wrath all the time, you're going to be generating a massive amount of ultimate, and these are the 2 reasons why. Now, not everyone's going to have access to Fighter's Guild or Mage's Guild right away. And again, I know it's kind of painful getting that leveled up. Mage's Guild option with an incredibly hard-hitting dot is Degeneration. This is really, really nice, and it's pretty easy to get a hold of in the Mage's Guild. Another flex option I go with, typically on my back bar, but you can use it here, is Living Dark. Living Dark is S tier in survivability. So what I do for a brand new player, and what I recommend to you if you struggle with survivability, is double bar something on the exact same key for survivability. So for this build, if I were brand new and didn't want to fuss with Barb Trap and monitoring that and babysitting the damage over time, I put Living Dark here. And then when I bar swapped, in the same key, the 3 key, I'd have Harness Magic. The reason why is your brain doesn't have to think about what bar am I on, what build am I on, what am I doing today. It's just the 3 key. Oh crap, my health dropped by 75%, hit 3. Gather what's going on and then make the next action, the next decision. So if you struggle with survivability, put Living Dark here. If you don't struggle with survivability, you got a couple options. Solar Barrage, massive AoE and grants some power, or Reflective Light or Vampire's Bane, another hard-hitting dot, and it's really nice because it has some range to it. But if you want the optimal damage in the easy mode, just huge DPS setup, Barb Trap is the way to go. Okay, now we got our active abilities done. Let's talk about the ultimate. The ultimate of choice is Flawless Dawnbreaker. Again, we can get more passives while slotting this. Flawless does not have the stun component, which I really don't need in PvE solo, but you could go with Dawnbreaker or Smiting. That's typically what people use in PvP. The reason this is so strong is it only costs 118 ultimate on this build, and it gives us 20 seconds of 300 spell damage. We've already talked about how fast we can generate ultimate, right? This has a very, very high uptime. So if you're generating ultimate by killing stuff because you have a Fighter's Guild ability slotted, you're using the Dawn's Wrath ability, you can almost maintain that 300% spell damage. And also you get juicy passives like 3% spell damage just for slotting it. So this is why I go that route over something like a Crescent Sweep. The nice thing about Crescent Sweep is it's base game. You don't have to go do a guild quest to get it or nothing. So you'd slot that on your front bar until you get it. Very low cost, hard hitting, and deals some damage over time in a big massive AoE, and increases damage when things are hitting your path. Downside is it doesn't have that spell damage component, and it doesn't have the juicy passives from Fighter's Guild. And that's our front bar. Now you're probably looking at me using daggers going, why is he using daggers and not a flame staff? Well, in case you don't know, we're going to go to dual wield. And the Twin Blade and Blunt passive is primarily what folks are using daggers these days. This passive here gives you critical chance rating 812 per dagger. So your main hand is typically where you get the most bang for your buck. And in the offhand, you run the charge trait with the flame enchant. That's going to give you the highest damage possible because you're already playing in melee range for puncturing sweeps. So you go the dagger route with either a Nern trait on the main hand or precise if you don't have Nern, and then charge in the offhand with the flame enchant. Going from a flame staff to dual wield, it's massive noticeable in damage. Yes, it seems weird. Yes, it's goofy, but you're playing in melee. You're already using Barb Trap. Make the switch because of this passive here, and you will not regret it. That's the main bar. Let's go to the back bar and talk about the destruction staff next. The old destruction staff. Primary reason we're using this on the back bar is one specific ability, and that is Unstable Wall of Elements. So what Unstable Wall does is it acts as a really strong damage over time, a good AoE that explodes. Primarily what we're going to use it for is the Maelstrom Arena Infernal Staff, which is going to increase our light and heavy attacks. So you're going to maintain this dot as your #1 priority on your back bar, and you can see just how wide it really is. So this goes really, really well with what the Templar already does. You put this down and you do puncturing sweeps, you can see you have just a massive amount of AoE pressure, and that's just with 2 abilities. Not to mention that this ability explodes when it's done, so you can activate the explosion automatically just by recasting it over and over and over if you want a big, massive AoE expandable, though I stick with puncturing sweeps. So another thing to note is if you have the Maelstrom back bar, typically this is the last damage over time effect you cast before you bar swap. I have another video on this, but just in case you didn't watch it, a tip for you is to bar swap on your last ability instantly as you cast it. So if you see this, we have a 1-second global cooldown, but it's very long and clunky. Look at the long, clunky animation, right? So what you do is, as soon as you click the ability, you click your bar swap. Now watch how fast this is. You can't even see the animation. It's almost like I'm hacking or something. I'm not. So I just click my bar swap as soon as I click the unstable wall. It just saves a lot of time. There's no block canceling per se in the game anymore, but there's bar swap canceling. So you're going to use this premise both on your front and your back bar. Time is DPS. The more time you save by putting light attack weaves along with your puncturing sweeps, by doing quick sweeps along with bar swap canceling, you'll add a ton of DPS. And this is why some of the top performers add tons of DPS. If you see them parsing, they're doing this bar swap canceling on their last ability on the front or back bar before they swap. Little bit advanced, but I wanted to show you that. So back bar, we know this is the last ability that we're going to cast. What's the first? Well, that's Channeled Focus, and another one that is just uber powerful, coming from the Restoring Light tree. So casting this is going to give us our physical resistance, make us a lot tankier. It's going to give us magic recovery over the entire duration. It costs almost nothing. 907 magicka, lasts for 25 seconds, and if we stand in it, it's going to heal us. The thing about Channel Focus is, don't feel like you have to stand in it, because the heal's pretty minimal, 1,000. You can go out of it. Again, you still get the benefits of having the resistances and all the other stuff from this rune without standing it. So you're going to maintain it, but don't feel like you have to be a stationary brick. You do not. Now, as you can kind of start seeing, look how much heals we have. So we have 1,000 heals per second. We got Purifying Light. It's going to blow up. And then watch this. So now we're up to 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 heals per second with Purifying Light going off, standing in my Channeled Focus, and I don't have a mythic, I don't have any gear healing me. It's just that disgustingly powerful. The next ability up is from Destruction Staff. Another reason I guess we're using Destruction Staff, and that's Elemental Drain. Elemental Drain does a couple things useful to you. Major Breach. Typically in group PvE, someone's going to provide this for you, lowering resistances. Mobs have right around 18,200 resistances. The lower you can make it, the harder you hit. So you want to provide this for yourself. Not to mention it also has magicka steal. So it's going to give us infinite resource sustain, basically. So between Channel Focus and this on your primary target, I don't use this on every single character or every single mob. Typically the boss or a mini-boss. So it has 28 meter range, 23 second duration, and it costs literally nothing. Also, it doesn't aggro. So what you can do is start the fight by doing this. So typically the pre-buff rotation is, okay, I got this, I got that down, I'm gonna hit my power, 3, 2, 1, throw a spear blockade, and so on. So you start the fight with Elemental Drain your Channel Focus up because it doesn't cause aggro. That's gonna give you a much better chance to get off to a good start with the fight. And then now we already talked about survivability, but just a basic mechanic here, Harness Magicka. This is a shield, scales off your magic and capped at 50% of your max health. So it's just an oh crap button. We have so much healing by doing damage. I don't go with Honor the Dead, Breath of Life, or a heal. It doesn't make sense to me. As long as I put a shield on and can survive maybe 2-3 seconds, I will get some healing just by doing puncturing sweeps. So for the average player, if you struggle with this and you don't understand this concept, I would probably drop a skill like Elemental Drain, or I would drop Trap Beast on the front and put Honor the Dead. This is the heal Honor the Dead from Restoring Light. More of a solo player morph, but typically I don't run that because the shield and or Living Dark allows me to be so survivable, because as long as I'm putting offensive pressure down, I'm getting a massive amount of healing. Just keep in mind, flex that ability on your front bar and the 3 key if this is not enough for you to survive. Now, last ability up on our back bar, and that is Blazing Spear. This is damage over time, has really useful synergy in group play. Big, massive AoE, 6 meter radius, 28 meter range in 10 seconds. So you can see that it's 10 seconds Blazing Spear, 10 seconds Unstable Wall, and then 23 seconds Elemental Drain, 25 seconds on Channel Focus. So typically you get 2 Blazing Spears / 2 Unstable Wall back-to-back casts before you have to reapply Channeled and Elemental Drain. So they work pretty well in tandem together. Light attack, this, light attack, and then bar swap. So that's kind of your typical back bar rotation. You go channel, drain, light attack, spear, and then bar swap. And then it's basically maintaining Purifying Light, maintaining Barb Trap 1, 2, 3. Looking at my timers, I get 1 more in, Purifying Light, bar swap, light attack, spear, light attack, and then go. And then the next rotation back, you're going to go channel focus, elemental drain, spear, blockade, front bar, Purifying Light, about 3 or 4 sweeps, exact same thing, rinse and repeat. But don't be so robotic with your rotation. If you're in trouble, you need to move, you need a line of sight, you need to heal, you need to shield, stop the rotation. You got to be able to break free, figure out what's going on, and having that 3 key double bar with something that's going to keep you survivable is really important. Now, back bar ultimates, you get a couple to choose from. So if you're doing parsing or want the most single target damage, Shooting Star from the Mages Guild is your go-to. Yes, you have to get the Mages Guild maxed out, and that's not a whole lot of fun. But it does a lot of damage, gives ultimate back, and stuns mobs. This is extremely useful in Vatashram Hollows or VMA where there's tons of mobs, and you just need to burn something. Me personally, I typically go with Elemental Rage. This is a Destruction Hub. The reason why is it does so much damage in a short window. Usually I save up ultimate for a boss, world boss, veteran boss, whatever, and then I drop this to start. But then from there after I use Dawnbreaker. Elemental Rage is not mobile friendly, so if they get out of this in 7 seconds, your ultimate's just gone. Whereas Flawless Dawnbreaker, it's not. You hit a Dawnbreaker, hits the target, deals damage over time, and plus you get that spell damage regardless of where you're standing or what you're doing. So typically I load this thing up for a first initial pull on a boss, and I cast it, then bar swap. That's typically how I use it. Another ultimate you can run back here, just in case you're just starting out, don't have anything, is Solar Prison. I'd highly recommend Shooting Star, more stationary, you need a stun, or Elemental Rage for that specific reason. It's so fast, so big, so powerful, so quick, they're not likely to get out of it. Again, let's go over the rotation, just be clear on this. So here we got our little guy, right? So, I'm going to use a Spell Power Potion, so I get my Spell Critical, and I get my Spell Power regardless on what bar I'm at. I go to my back bar, and I put my Channeled Focus down, and I hit my Elemental Drain. Combat has not started yet, right? So what we can do is we can go back here, little advance, hit Inner Light, fully charge it, this, and then bang. Now I go to my front, closing the distance a little bit. So I'm going to light attack, Barb Trap, light attack, Purifying Light, and about 3, maybe 4 jabs depending on how fast you are, and then you're going to the back right as Purifying Light blows up. So as Purifying Light blows up, I reapply it and then immediately bar swap. Okay? Now what will be off cooldown is Blazing Spear, 10 seconds, Unstable Wall, light attack, Spear, light attack, Unstable. And then you're going to go back. Usually Purifying Light is maybe 1 cast or 2 cast away from popping. You're going to reapply that. You got about 1, 2 puncturing sweeps, and then usually Trap Beast is off cooldown. I Trap Beast it, go to the back, Channeled, Drain, Blazing, Unstable, bar swap. And so you got to get in this flow of every 2 casts, you have 2 more globals to apply. Usually when you come on your front bar, you're going to need to apply Purifying Light, do about 3 or 4 jabs, go to the back, rinse and repeat. So you get this very easy flow of maintaining. The number one thing you're going to want to maintain your back bar is Unstable Wall. The number one thing you're going to want to maintain on your front bar is Purifying Light. Those two things alone, along with puncturing sweeps and radiant glory at around 30 to 25%, are enough to carry your DPS through almost anything, along with your survivability. So let's switch gears and talk about the gear next. Now we're to the gear section and the meat and potatoes, and this is the base game loadout that I showed you all those clips that I used and beat Batashram Hollow in I think about 22 minutes without any deaths, no sigils, nothing, so the trifecta run. First 5-piece up is Overwhelming Surge. This comes from Tempest Island. It's a dungeon, part of the base game. You can run it on normal. You don't even have to run it on veteran. So what it's going to do is basically a class ability like Puncturing Sweeps. It's going to have AoE shock damage, and it's going to give you back magic for a percentage of the damage done. You're playing in melee range. You're using those daggers. You're up close and personal. It does a lot of things. It basically carries our resource sustain. A lot of people in solo use Perfected False Gods. That's a really, really good loadout and one that I prefer later on in endgame. This carries our resource sustain, deals damage, it's base game, and it's very easy to get a hold of. So I'd highly recommend Overwhelming Surge for the average player as a 5-piece to go with. Another option here is Mother Sorrow, 5-piece Overland Deshawn. This is a great flex option if you don't have access to it because it gives you critical chance. So the 5-piece gives you critical chance, so does the 3 and 4-piece. Now, another option for sustain that's Overland, outlook here, if you can't get Overwhelming Surge or you don't want to, is Withered Hand. When something dies within 28 meters when you're in combat, you're not only going to get magicka back, you're going to get health. So when you're playing solo, typically there's a lot of mobs to kill, a lot of ads. This thing will carry your resource sustain and survivability, plus people sell it dirt cheap on the traders. So don't sleep on Withered Hand until you get Overwhelming Surge. Incredible 5-piece. And then what's considered best in slot is Perfected False Gods of Devotion. So it's going to reduce your magic abilities cost by 8%. It's going to give you back magic and major expedition on kills. This is really, really incredible. If you can get access to trials, it is in Sunspire. Second 5-piece, and what I run on my jewelry and my weapons, is Deadly Strikes. This comes from the Bruma Cyrodiil vendor. You can spend alliance points to buy these bags, RNG, or buy it off the traders. Daggers, Nirnhone in the main, and Charge is best in slot. But go with an Inferno and or go with a Lightning Staff if you can't get a hold of those. Those will do in the meantime. So what this does is increase your damage over time and channel abilities by 15%. This is basically everything we do, minus Purifying Light. But remember, Purifying Light's damage is capped anyways. So it's just going to make your Puncturing Sweeps, your Beam, Unstable Wall hit incredibly hard. So there's no complex buff and rotation and light attack weaving like Kinra's and Togvin's. You just put your front bars activated. This thing works. Absolutely incredible 5-piece. There's some other really, really good ones, though, that you can go with in case you don't have access to this, and that's War Maidens. War Maiden, I think, comes from Vardenfell, but it adds 600 weapon and spell damage to your magic abilities on your front bar. It's magic ability, so it's not going to apply to flame damage ability, so if you're using Unstable Wall, and then you bar swap, this won't get amplified. But for the average player, War Maiden or Deadly, these 2 pieces on your front bar does not require complex babysitting like Kinra's or Togvin's, and I'd highly recommend if you can't perfectly light attack weave. These 2 options, you can either buy them on the guild traders or like Deadly Strikes, get it with alliance points if you're a PvPer. So those are 2 5-pieces. Now the monster helm is Nirioneth. This comes from, I think, Crypto Hearts 2. I don't have the optimal trait on here. I went with medium and a health enchant, so my health would be right around 23,000 with food. I really recommend for the average solo player to get to that margin. You can use 511 or 61 depending on how many champion points and your attribute, loadout, and so on. But that's why I went with 1 medium. And the reason I went with a medium, in case you don't know, is the Undaunted passive. Something you're going to need to work on maxing out is Undaunted Metal. Increase health, stamina, and magicka per armor type. So if you want just a little boost in HP, you can just throw on another armor type. Also, another reason why medium is good as a magic spellcaster is agility. Increases weapon and spell damage by 2%. So we're already getting a massive increase in spell damage, 10 and 20 by major and minor sorcery. This extra 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but it goes a long way. So 6 and 1 gave me the best resource sustain, max stats available. And the reason why I use Nirioneth is it's good single target, it's good AoE, it's good in dungeons, it's good in trials, it's good solo. Is it best in slot in every situation, every class? No. but it's very, very easy to get a hold of. It does not require any complex loadout or coordination with another player. You set it part of base game, you do damage, it spawns and goes boom. So you can see it right here when I do it. There's Overwhelming Surge, the blue thing that's popping. And then there's the crystal. So it blows up. Typically, I like it because you're in melee range anyway, so a lot of the mobs are going to be around here. It procs frequently, and it just adds to our AoE damage kill potential. There's a lot of different monster helms and options you can go with. Ice Heart is a great option for pure survivability, because when you deal crit damage, it's going to give you a shield. So I'd recommend that if you struggle with survivability, you want to make a small adjustment in your gear and not change all of the damage components, just switch to Ice Heart. Also a part of the base game, very easy to get a hold of, and a good monster helm to go with. So now we've talked about monster helms. Last piece up is our Backbar Weapon, and that's going to be Maelstrom Arena. Now, I have the Perfected, which you can run Veteran. This is from Hrothgar, so it is actually not a part of the base game. What it's going to do is increase your light and heavy attacks as long as you keep Unstable Wall up. That's why it's so important to keep that up, because light attacks are one of our top damage sources. You're going to run an infused enchant with weapon and spell damage, and people probably haven't told you why this is, but if you run Unstable Wall, even when you bar swap, the Berserker enchant will reapply. Do you see that Berserker enchant increasing our spell damage by 400 plus? As it blows up, it continues to reapply it. See? It's already back up, and I haven't even cast an ability. No, this is not an illusion. So infuse on the back bar with a Berserker or spell damage enchant is why it's so strong. So that's why Unstable Wall with this gear loadout adds an enormous amount of damage to your character. You don't have access to Maelstrom Arena, or you don't want to play it, just get Willpower. Willpower is not perfect, but on the back bar, you can get 1691 max magicka. That's actually quite useful for a beginner because max magicka increases our shields. So on the back bar, with a harness magic, it will make your shield much stronger. And I would use this until I started working on Maelstrom Arena, or you found a better option. This with an infused Berserker is a really, really good secondary choice. Okay, we just get a snapshot of kind of the min-max, kind of the little optimal things you can do. Is I would go Poison in the main hand with Noon, Charge in the offhand Fiery, so that way the flame damage enchant procs frequently. Also infuse weapon damage, talked about this. 1 max health Glyph, you can go with the monster helm. I would go all divines, this is not optimal, but 6 and 1 with 1 magicka, 1 health one will really work for you. 23,000 is what I'd recommend with food. Max magicka glyphs, all divine traits if you can. You're just starting out, don't freak out about the traits or making everything gold. The biggest thing is just getting the 5-piece activated at CP 160 or higher. Don't freak out about the traits when you just start. Just worry about getting to CP 160 and collecting the 5-piece set. Start upgrading from blue to purple, and then really wait on gold till the very end. The number one thing you're going to want to gold out is your weapons and your jewelry. Those things add the most value, specifically the weapons. Everything else you can really leave purple, including the jewelry, unless you're loaded. And then bloodthirsty traits, so you're going to have to transmute those. Arcane is okay when you're starting out, but bloodthirsty does add a lot of damage. And the spell damage glyphs is just up to you on how much resources staying. 1 magic recovery, 2 spell damage is a healthy split between the two. That's the gear setup. I'm going to give you 2 more flexible options. I'm going to pull these gear charts up. Here's a quick snapshot of what I would use if I was just a brand new beginner. When I started over on PCU, it's exactly what I used. 5-piece Mother Sorrow, 5-piece Withered Hand, 2-piece Willpower in my main and backhand. Don't worry about the traits so much. Just get the 5 pieces and the 2-piece active. This should be very easy base game for you to obtain. Gonna have great resource sustain and survivability. Now, the mythic best in slot type option here is if you're trying to push score, I would go with Perfected False Gods on at all time, Deadly Strikes on your front bar, and then I would go with Pale Order, Death Dealer's Fate, Mark-ins, or whatever your favorite mythic of choice is. Even Thracian Strangler if you're really trying to push the score, but 1 mythic slot, and going 6 and 1 with Slimecraw, because Slimecraw gives you the most spell critical as a 1-piece. This is the sweaty mythic route if you have options to mythics and trials gear. Now, the miscellaneous parts of this build, and I've talked about it before, but it's really important to understand how spell power potions affect your build. You'll see the tooltip here, and it says 47.6. Major Prophecy, critical, and then Major Sorcery, spell damage. So I have inner light on my front bar, but I don't want to lose that when I switch to my back bar, and I don't want to sacrifice a skill. So what you do is you level alchemy up. Now, my alchemy medicinal use. This is what causes the longer duration. There's a 45-second cooldown on potions. So you use this, get it all the way up, just take these 3 and then remove the other skill points. That way you have 100% uptime on critical and spell damage. Very important. The food choices I'd go with is the expensive route is Clockwork Citrus Fillet. The non-expensive food, a little bit lower in potential here, is Witch Mother's Potent Brew. That's good if you don't have all the gold. And then this here is Ghastly Eyeball. This is mainly for parsing. So very low, 19,000 HP, pretty high risk, but high reward because your sustain is just mind-numbingly, and you can switch to another DPS set. Champion points here. So the green tree really doesn't perfect your performance. This Gifted Rider is pretty good because it increases your movement speed, war mount. Treasure Hunter is really the main one in the green tree because it increases the quality. Basically, you're farming dungeons solo, and then Steed's Blessing gives you a little bit more movement speed. And the blue tree is a really impactful one. So I go with Fighting Finesse because Backstabber, getting the flank, is not going to be possible all the time solo. I go with Wraithful Strikes because it can increase my spell damage. And then Deadly Aim and Master of Arms. Both Biting Aura and Thaumaturge I've played with, but I don't prefer them over Wraithful Strikes. I think it's just simple set and forget. So those are the 4 slottables I'd get. If you're a brand new player, the most impactful thing possible in the game is to take this passive, Preparation. So what I did when I started over on EU, I got to like make 200 champion points or something. I took 10 in Eldritch Insight, immediately came down here, took 10 in Quick Recovery, and then take Preparation. It's passive, doesn't require a slottable, reduces damage by 10%. If you do not have this, you're low on champion points, you're struggling with survivability, don't worry about the damage slottables. This one will increase your survivability dramatically. Moving to the red tree here. 2 I go with is Fortified Boundless Vitality, and a 3rd, Bastion for bigger shields, along with Siphoning Spell increases our sustain when we kill stuff. You can drop the Bastion and go with Rejuvenation for even more sustain if you don't struggle with survivability. But I found this 4 combination is the best for my build. Couple last things here. I go with High Elf Race. Best all around in my opinion for damage reduction, sustain, and damage. Attribute-wise, I go 64 here. Now, you can go with health if you want, as long as you get to right around 23,000. There's other players that will tell you, you don't need that much health. God bless them. This will allow you to have a little bit of mistakes and not just get one shot. So I highly recommend 23,000, and then the rest into max magicka, however you get that. I go with the Thief Mundus Stone. If you're playing truly solo, the Lover Mundus Stone does really, really good damage as well. But it's not going to offer you the healing or the crit or anything else. So Thief is my go-to all around, just works really well. Clockwork Citrus Fillet up here. And if we get fully buffed, we can kind of see our stats here. So I'm going to put this down, put that, and let's see what we got. So let's drop Unstable, and if our weapon damage enchant procs, we're at 6,800 spell damage with major and minor up, and our weapon damage enchant proc, and that's right around 50% critical. So right around 7,000 spell damage with 50% critical on our front bar is not bad, and 32,000 magic. Long-winded video. Hope you liked this in-depth video. Seemed like you really liked the PvP build, so I tried it on a PvE build. Like, comment, subscribe, and if you like this type of thing, I'll just keep cranking them out for other characters and classes as I start getting a little bit more in-depth in solo builds that the average player can pick up. It does not require mythics, does not require some complex rotation, and I can't pull it off, and that's okay. Anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.